Hi there. Today's task is to ink up our cardboard relief block for the first time. I have sealed it. I've also made a printing jig. I'm going to print on the heavier weight Canson edition paper today. I'm a little worried that our really delicate washi paper may tear if I'm burnishing too hard on this really rough plate. So I think I'm going to use a little bit more durable printmaking paper for this one. The drawback of the Canson edition paper is that you can't see through the backside like you can see through the washi paper, so it's harder to use the heavyweight printmaking paper if you're going to do a kiss print or something where you have to be able to see exactly where you're burnishing. But if you're just planning to print it all in one value with the same amount of pressure, then the heavier weight paper should work just fine. So I've rolled out some of my black Akua ink and I'm ready to roll it out. I'm going to move my printing jig out of the way so that I'm not getting ink on it as I ink my block. And I'm kind of thinking about which way I want to roll this, because if I roll across this way, the roller is going to drop down into all of these low areas of the plate, and I may not like that. So I'm going to start out by just inking really kind of carefully, following the angle of the cuts here, and try not to let my brayer drop down too much into the low areas. You may find that some little bits of the cardboard are raised up a little bit higher than other parts, so you might need to be a little bit more attentive as you're inking your plate to make sure you hit all of those areas. I also want to try to keep my fingers off the inked part of the plate, but I want to hold it so it doesn't shift around too much. So I'm just going to put my finger down in one of these low areas here. You may find that the first time you ink up your cardboard block, some of the ink is absorbing into the cardboard, especially if you haven't sealed it 2 or 3 times. So you might need to add a little bit extra ink to get that really velvety rich black. I think I do want to see what will happen when I roll the ink across this rough section of the cardboard. So I'm going to intentionally let the brayer drop down in there a little bit and pick up some of the tones in the background to suggest a little bit more of a atmosphere there. I may or may not try to print it. We'll see if it wants to pick up the ink or not. I'm not sure if I like that. Okay, so move my inking paper out of the way, bring my template back in, center my plate on the template. This template is 11 by 14, but my printing paper is 11 by 15. So instead of making a whole new template, I'm just going to align 3 edges of the paper with my template and then let the extra inch hang off the bottom. Usually having a little more space at the bottom is nice anyway, because that's where you sign your print, and it's convenient to have a little more space there anyway. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can wipe off some of these areas. The plate has been sealed, but it's still not quite as easy to wipe off as wiping off a plastic plate would be. I'll see how this goes. I'm not crazy about this, but yeah, I'm going to leave it on there I think for now. I might just burnish real lightly there. So we've got our plate squared up. My fingers, wipe them off again with a little bit of a baby wipe. We'll line up our printmaking paper. Try not to let it set down on the plate until you've got the edges lined up. And once you set it down, try not to wiggle it around, even if you realize it's not absolutely perfectly straight on there. And then I will tape it down. Since it's the same size as the template, it's not actually taped to the template, so it still may shift around a little bit. I'm hoping it doesn't. And then we'll burnish. So I've got a piece of parchment paper I'll use as a little bit of a buffer as I burnish. And try not to let the plate shift around very much. Since I can't see through this paper, I'm going to have to be peeking at my print pretty frequently to make sure I'm hitting all the areas of the design. So I'll peek a little bit to show you how it's going, and then I'm going to spend a few more minutes off camera burnishing for another 5 minutes or so, and we'll come back. Alright, so I've been burnishing for another 5 minutes or so. I realized that this paper has quite a bit more texture than the washi paper does, and so I had to go back and burnish, and in fact I even went in and added a little bit more ink. I held the paper where it needed to be, but then I inked up some areas that were just a little bit too gray and added a little bit more ink. So now that we pull it off, we've got a pretty good image. It's still a little bit gray here, so I think either I didn't put quite enough ink on in that area, or there might be a little bit of texture from where I put the gel medium on. If there's brush strokes or something in there, it may cause it to have a little bit more texture, which makes it hard to print as a nice velvety black. But I think overall I'm pretty happy with it. If there are areas that pick up ink that I'm not wanting to pick up ink, I can cut those areas a little bit deeper, or I can seal it again and just be real careful about wiping the ink off those areas before I print it. I noticed here on this leg there's a white mark there, and that must be where I accidentally slipped and cut it at one point. So I can see if I can fill that in with a little bit more gel medium or glue or something like that, but otherwise I think the print for a first test is pretty good. The next thing I want to show you is how to plan a second plate that's going to line up exactly with this one. So we're going to be doing an offset process in order to transfer the wet ink from the block to a second block so that the shapes line up exactly.